is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at the Acer Aspire S7. This is the Dash 392 model, 13-inch. This is the refresh with Intel Haswell inside, 4th generation CPUs, and that means much improved battery life and still everything else that we liked about the last generation S7, and we're going to look at it now. So this is the Acer Aspire S7. This is the refresh with Intel Haswell 4th generation CPUs inside. Higher capacity battery as well, a couple of other improvements we'll talk about, but largely the same as the last generation S7 in terms of the design, and what you get inside SSD is still a RAID 0 configuration for extreme speed. The memory is soldered on board. The good thing is now it starts with 8 gigs of RAM instead of 4 gigs. Nice, because you can't upgrade it after the fact. As you can see, obviously it's a white laptop, isn't it? It's not just a white laptop. This is Gorilla Glass too. Glass lid. Beautiful. Doesn't show fingerprints too much since it's white. The little Acer logo actually lights up when you open it up. The backlighting from the display shows through. Really, really super thin. Gorgeous looking product, isn't it? 2.87 pounds, so extremely light, just like the Sony Vaio Pro. In fact, it's actually a little bit heavier than the Vaio Pro because that's still the 13-inch model, still the lightest 13-inch out there. Toshiba Kirbook also quite light in the same weight class. Again, all those are, of course, more premium Ultrabooks that are more expensive. If we take a look at the side right here, you have a USB 3.0 port. That's our power button next to the charging port. Acer moved the power button because the last generation it was awfully hard to hit. I find it's still hard to hit here, especially if you're plugging or unplugging the power. You tend to hit this button, a little bit annoying. And it's a weird button. It doesn't really move very much. There's no tactile feel. It's strange, just strange. Here's your SD card slot. An SD card will stick out. You can see the height of the blank. That gives you an idea. At least half of your SD card will stick out if you have it in there. Nice metal around the edges here. The whole body is actually aluminum underneath this lovely Gorilla Glass right here. Take a look at the back. Painted white, still aluminum. Pretty easy to take this apart. You just undo all these Torx screws and the back pops right off. But there's not much to upgrade in here other than the SSD drive. Pretty much everything is soldered on this guy anyway, but you could access the battery, which now is up to 6280 milliamps, much higher capacity battery. So one problem with the S7 last generation was well, very weak battery life. This guy is much better. It goes for about 6 hours on a charge, which is certainly more usable. Got our intake ports here, also over here. We have cooling. Little LED indicator area over here. You can see it whether it's open or closed, lets you know if it's charging or if it's plugged in. On this side here we have another USB 3.0 port, our combo 3.5mm headphone jack, full-size HDMI port. It's nice to have. And this is Acer's proprietary port for accessories. Now I know it looks like a mini display port, but it's not. Too bad that. Just like the last generation model, it doesn't just open up, you know, like your regular notebook, say to 130 degrees or something like that. It has the double hinge, so you can feel the resistance here, and then you keep pushing back and you can open it all the way flat. So for those of you who have a use for all the way flat, cool, there it is. 10-point touchscreen, so there is actually some point to having something that's flat. It's great if you're playing games, maybe if you're giving a presentation, that kind of thing. And we still have a beautiful IPS display inside. Glossy, as you can see. So here we have the same lovely 13.3-inch full HD display, 1920 by 1080. Now, there are going to be some laptops that have even higher resolution, and I can tell you, even with Windows 8.1, which handles scaling better, I think it's just overkill for resolution. 1920 by 1080 is already very sharp on the desktop. And we're not using any scaling here, so right now we are at 100% scaling, and things are pretty darn tiny. And even with Windows 8.1 scaling, we're not running 8.1 on here, but I put it on a couple of other machines. I can tell you things are still a little bit awkwardly small. Keyboard is, as ever, kind of a unique Acer approach to things, shall we say. You can see the key travel is pretty shallow because they made this thing so incredibly thin. But they have increased the key travel. It was 1mm, now it's 1.3. Does 1/3 of a millimeter help? It does. You can feel the difference a little bit. It's still a very shallow keyboard, but it is more tactile. So you're going to have to get used to your fingers kind of bottoming out on the keyboard. I think you can do it. For me, it feels about as firm, shall we say, as the Sony Vaio Duo 13, which also has a kind of strong bottoming out sensation. If you look at the keyboard layout itself, they do a couple of things that are a little bit unusual here. Like your delete key, where did it go? Oh, it's oversized and it's over here. A little bit accident prone being over there, I think. Instead of having a Windows key on both, which would be pretty handy, especially for Windows 8, we have it just on the left side. Instead of a Windows key on this side, we have this oddball little key over here instead. The oversized enter key I like a whole lot. The insert is just fine over here. We do have our little arrow pad. Now, for your FN-based multimedia controls for your brightness and your volume right there, usually they're at the top row, but instead they've been moved down to be here on your little arrow cluster, which is a little bit weird. One-handed action there, just about impossible unless you work for the NBA as a basketball player. This has the same EL electroluminescent backlight, which is kind of neat. It's sort of like an organic lighting. It's kind of faintly light blue-green, and it doesn't contrast super well with the silver keys here, so it's not the easiest thing to see unless the room is really, really dark. If it's just kind of medium dim, then it might actually make it a little harder to see the keys, if anything, but it's not the end of the world. Got a pretty large trackpad here, glass trackpad, and actually it works fairly well. No complaints with the trackpad on this. And here's what the keyboard backlighting looks like in a dark room. Not the easiest thing to see. Right now we have set it to maximum. You can use the FN keys on the keyboard to adjust that. And here's what the Acer logo looks like on the back. Now, since we have Haswell inside, Intel 4th generation, if you've been watching our reviews, you know that that does not actually change our performance numbers a whole lot. What it does is it gets you a whole lot better battery life, potentially. So right here for our Windows Experience Index, you see pretty much the same you would with the Ivy Bridge. For our processor, we have a 6.9. This is the Intel Core i5-4200U clocked at 1.6 gigahertz in here with our 8 gigs of RAM. Dual channel RAM, obviously, because RAM scores 7.5. Our desktop graphics is 5.9, and that's with Intel HD 4400 integrated graphics. 3D gaming graphics, 6.5. And the SSD, that's again in a RAID 0, that's that Acer thing they like to do for performance, that scores a very impressive 8.3. Now on PC Mark 7 it scored 5015. That's quite good for a Core i5 CPU, so good numbers there, really helped by the fast solid-state storage. And on Crystal Disk Mark, which is our measurement for SSD drives, I'm going to show you how well it did. And there are our scores in Crystal Disk Mark. Very, very good read speeds. They're pretty good write speeds. It's right up there, very competitive with Sony's PCIe SSD and the Vaio Pro 13. So good numbers there, good fast storage, absolutely no complaints. Now how about the display? The display is certainly very pleasing to look at. You'll notice that the camera is picking up some of the refresh rate here, but the naked eye can't see it, so don't worry too much about that. To look at the display, you'd be in love with it. It seems very high contrast, very colorful, very bright at 350 nits. And you can see how our colors are right here. This is measured with our spider calibrator, 72% of sRGB. That's not super duper impressive. Really, the display looks better than that. It would fool you to take a look at it. Color calibration was pretty decent out of the box, a little too cool, which is not uncommon. So that falls well short of the Vaio Pro and the Vaio Duo 13, which had 95% of sRGB. And for Adobe RGB, which is a wider spectrum, even harder to cover for color gamut, 55% of Adobe RGB versus closer to 75% on the Sony products that compete with this. So for you graphic types, for graphics professionals, those of you who do HD video editing professionally, keep that in mind. This is not going to be the most color accurate display, even though it's a very pleasant display to look at. Contrast is pretty good at 600 to 1. Black levels are pretty good as well on this. Now one thing you've probably noticed is you haven't heard the fan howling. Acer's twin cooling fans, they used that on the last generation S7. Somehow it managed to take a little bit of air movement and make a lot of noise. It really kind of backfired and didn't work out well for them. They've revised the blade design on the fans, and this time the guy does not roar even when you're doing some moderately challenging tasks. So it's no longer a little vacuum cleaner. Much improved there. CPU temperatures are good, around 46 degrees centigrade for the cores when doing average productivity work, which is pretty much par for the course for an Ultrabook and way under the maximum thermal allowance of 100 degrees centigrade. So No complaints there. Again, with battery life, with our battery that's sealed inside, a huge capacity battery in here, just like Sony. Acer has learned that you got to put a big battery in these guys. So they've filled up this whole section, and we have an internal image that we'll show you so you can see what the internals are like. But very big battery means good battery life. Routinely so far, 6 hours on a charge, which is reasonably competitive with other longer-lasting Ultrabooks on the market. No, it's not going to match the MacBook Air 13-inch with Haswell, but among Windows notebooks, I think that's quite usable for many people. And that means 6 hours of actual use time, not 6 hours including sleep time. So that's a lot of time to actually be able to use your notebook. As you can see, we have Dolby speakers here on the bottom on each side. Not too loud, unfortunately. Acer has impressed us with some of their products like the W700 and made a really loud 11.6-inch tablet there. And their 11.6-inch last generation S7 was also quite good. These are just okay. They distort if you go much above 75%, but we'll play some video so you can hear that. The laptop has Intel 7260N 802.11bgn Wi-Fi. Same thing's used in the Vio Pro 13. So far, it's actually not been problematic for us. Maybe Acer had a little more time to get those drivers ready, unlike Sony, who tried so hard to be first to the market with Haswell. But we've seen pretty good data transfer rates and normal behavior, no disconnects when 40 feet from the router, which for us is pretty much as far as we can get with our access points, given the number of walls we have in between, before we start to see some problems. However, even going outdoors when there aren't so many walls in between, this guy does pretty well. Has Bluetooth 4.0 as well. And speaking of the Vio Pro 13, here it is next to the Vio Pro 13. You can see just about the same footprint. Both of these very attractive laptops. The Vio Pro starts out a little bit cheaper at $1,250 for the same i5 and 128 gig SSD. Of course, you do get 4 gigs of RAM on the Vio versus 8 gigs on the Acer. The Acer, by the way, retails for $1,500. We have the Microsoft Signature Store edition right here, and the i7 1.8 gigahertz 4500U sells for $1,700, and that gets you a 256 gig SSD as well, still 8 gigs of RAM. Now we'll have a smackdown of both of these guys so we can compare both of them and help you decide which one might be better for you. One thing I will say is each of them might feel delicate in their own way. The Acer is more rigid, but it has glass. Gorilla Glass too for this surface here and on the screen, but still we always feel like we have to be a little careful with glass, and the Sony is carbon fiber, which is a flexible thing, so some people are disconcerted by having a flexible product. And now for a little web browsing. Obviously this is a standard Windows 8 computer, 64-bit Windows inside. It can handle web browsing just fine, and it's a quick Ultrabook at that, but we're really going to take a look at some video playback so you can hear what the speakers are like and see how it looks when it plays video. By the way, again, our desktop scaling is at 100%, so we're not zooming in any way, and our IE is set to 100% as well, so this is what text looks like. You can, of course, pinch zoom to your heart's content, or you can set the default zoom for text to be larger as well if you find this is too teeny for your eyes. We'll take a look at our video review of the Asus Republic of Gamer G750. See what I mean? It's kind of loud and harsh. This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to look at a cool gaming laptop. This is the Asus Republic of Gamers G750JX. This is the version with 60%. The NVIDIA GTX 770M, new Haswell quad-core inside, big 17.3-inch display. We're going to look at it now. So this is the latest iteration of the... So we got the volume there, but it's also pretty darn harsh. Anything above 50% starts to feel a little irritating to me. You might like it okay, but it does make a considerable amount of sound, I would say, for something that's 13.3 inches. So who's the Acer Aspire S7-392 for? Anybody who's looking for an Ultrabook and wants something a little bit higher end. Definitely you want a higher resolution display like this one has, touchscreen with gloss, super thin, super light. If those kind of things appeal to you, obviously you're going to be looking at this. Again, this is going to be on the pricier end a bit, starting at $1,500 for an i5 processor. A little shocking when Acer manages to be more expensive than Sony there, but still it's a very compelling and very attractive looking product, and I like the fact that they have improved the keyboard, so it's much more comfortable to use. It's certainly large enough that in terms of ergonomics of doing this, that's just fine on it. Also, cooling way improved from the last generation, so no complaints with that. Doesn't sound like a vacuum cleaner anymore. A gaming machine, obviously it's not. This is an Ultrabook with integrated graphics, Intel HD 4400 graphics. Again, you're looking at a 3D Mark 11 score around 1,000 for the performance mode. But you can play casual games on this, you can play Civ 5 on this, you can play older games on it, and it's just fine. This is not your machine for Call of Duty or Crysis 3. So that's the Acer Aspire S7. It's just starting to appear in stores now. Again, this is the -392 model that has Haswell inside. And if you're looking for a premium Ultrabook, it certainly is attractive. And largely it has everything that the first generation did that we liked an awful lot. The beautiful white glass lid, slim design, incredible lightweight. But has some competition now from, say, the Sony Vaio Pro 13, and I'm sure there can be some other Ultrabooks out there as well. That might be a little less expensive while still being premium. Still, if you just live for this design and you love the look of it, I can understand that. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Visit our website for the full review of the Acer Aspire S7, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.